So of all the incredible educational experiences I've had throughout my formal education, the one that's had the greatest impact on my life was an improv comedy class I took back in middle school. As a shy, quiet, introverted kid, the remote possibility of doing anything plausibly theatrical was absolutely terrifying. But improv really helped me overcome my fears, helped me break a bit out of my shell, and just generally made school all the more tolerable. I would actually go on to do improv through middle school, up and through college, and it actually even helped me land my first job as a middle school social studies teacher. Now, I know deep down that my soon-to-be principal was actually super excited about my degree in political science and my extensive knowledge of contemporary Western European immigration policy. The only thing she actually cited when she hired me was my improv background. It was the only thing that gave her any sort of confidence that I could entertain 12 and 13-year-olds for any period of time. So I'm sure if we actually went around the room and had other folks share their experiences with arts education throughout their K through 12 schooling, I'm sure we'd hear many similar experiences. It might not necessarily manifest in your profession, but it could just be a hobby or just something that made life a little bit better. Well, these days I actually do education research, and I actually apply quantitative methods quite a bit, which means I'm obsessed with trying to put numbers on these types of experiences. Now, reflecting back on your own or thinking about mine, you might be saying, such a deep, rich experience, how can you possibly ever put cold, hard numbers on that? Well, I'm going to argue that not only is it possible, it's also very much necessary. Many of you probably are already pretty well aware that the state of the arts in the United States with regards to K-12 education is in a bit of a crisis. Over the past 35 years, K-12 arts learning opportunities has been in steady decline, especially for students from historically underserved populations where those opportunities have been cut in half over the past 35 years. The primary culprit, standardized testing. When schools come under sanction or even just the threat of sanction, principals are put at the difficult task of deciding how to reallocate their resources. And in most cases, it comes at the expense of the arts, as well as other non-tested subject areas. Now, advocates for arts education have three huge obstacles in trying to combat this current decline. One, the arts are often viewed as something that's just simply frivolous, something we do for fun. It's great, kids like it, but deep down it doesn't have any sort of educational value that we might deep down care about. Two, a lot of the research that's actually been done to try to demonstrate the benefits of arts education research typically relies on what we have available in terms of data. And what we have in terms of data tends to be standardized test scores. And while there's nothing wrong with math and reading, those are the things that we typically don't think about when we talk about arts outcomes. The third major challenge is that the research currently available typically relies on more correlational findings. What I mean by that is although we know there's a strong association between students who engage with the arts and how well they succeed in schools, what we don't know is whether or not students who succeed in schools, if they're just simply inclined to do the arts, or if the arts actually makes them better students. These challenges have really become the inspiration for my for my research agenda. What I do is I conduct and collaborate with others to do randomized control trials to see what the actual causal impacts are of arts education programs and interventions, and I'm looking at things that span beyond the traditional standardized test scores. What we found so far, I think, is actually pretty exciting. We find that these types of interventions increase students' abilities to critically think. We also find that it helps them exhibit empathy. It turns out when you actually take in art, it requires you to put yourself in other people's shoes, whether it be the artist or a theater character. We also see it increases political tolerance. When you start realizing the value of self-expression, you quickly realize that it overrides some of the discomfort that comes about when you hear others self-express themselves, and maybe it's not super familiar, or maybe it makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable. So we find it actually increases tolerance as well. And finally, we've also found that it increases what's called cultural capital. When students engage with the arts inside of schools, they're also more likely to engage in the arts outside of schools. This has both been expressed in survey data, as well as when we actually hand students tickets who were both in treatment and controls. After going to field trips to art museums, those who were in the treatment were actually more likely to come back to the museum outside of school over the weekend and bring back their families. Now, this is merely just scratching the surface. When we're thinking back again about these rich experiences that you and I have had, yes, these are, it only partially encapsulates the true meaning of these things. But the fact that we're getting these significant effects, these detectable effects, and it's only just partially capturing it, I think really speaks to the truth about the value of the arts. Now, to conclude, I think that this has major implications on three fronts. One, I think it shows that the arts are far from frivolous. It has outcomes that we deep down do care about in education. Second, it shows that the trend with standardized testing and students losing these opportunities has a significant opportunity cost. And finally, and perhaps most significantly, it reminds us, maybe just subtly, that schools are about so much more than things that are captured on standardized test scores. Thank you.